Cyber attacks are surging in our industry, targeting commercial and industrial facilities more than ever. OT deployments have emerged as a key component in our cybersecurity landscape, exposing critical infrastructure to today's sophisticated cyber criminals. Government agencies are looking for industry leaders to take more aggressive actions to mitigate the threats capable of causing wide-scale havoc. But there is a glaring absence of collaboration among the individuals involved in the design and construction of smart buildings. There must be a dedicated effort to unify cybersecurity standards across the industry. There must be a more proactive approach for developing streamlined processes and universally adopted best practices. There must be cyber harmony. Cyber harmony is a call to action for fostering a more collaborative relationship among the various individuals and organizations responsible for the cybersecurity infrastructure of smart buildings. Exploring the cyber harmony model unveils a spectrum of potential project stakeholders integral to an OT deployment. Promoting cyber harmony will encourage communication across this spectrum, using the collective knowledge of each role to reveal vulnerabilities before they can be exploited. Ultimately, by practicing cyber harmony, these roles will become more clearly defined, and the pathways to stronger cybersecurity will be easier to navigate.
Okay, so we're going to get started with our next session, and it's it revolves around cybersecurity and what we like to call cyber harmony. And I've got Mike McMahon here from Newcomb and Boyd, Donnie Walker from Newcomb and Boyd, and you guys just met Nitesh from Neeve. We're going to talk about cybersecurity products, and the need for collaboration in our industries amongst the different stakeholders. When we look at cybersecurity, we typically look at cybersecurity from just an owner's IT perspective. But when you're talking about deploying OT into the built environment, now you're talking about the potential of the general contractor being involved or a construction manager being involved, a consulting engineer, systems integrators, commissioning agents. There's a plethora of stakeholders that are involved in deploying cyber-secure OT solutions into the built environment, and we want to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to let Mike get started here.
Cool. Thank you, Greg. So yeah, just a real quick question here. Can anybody tell me the difference between IT and OT? 2 letters. Yeah, I like that one. That's really good. So one is information technology. It's technology that produces information. If you use AI, GPT, you type something and it gives you information back, right? You have things that produce information. If you write an email to somebody, you want it to be secured. That's information that gets transmitted back and forth between 2 parties. OT, operational technology, is technology that senses or manipulates the physical world. Big key differentiator there. As that evolves, we're also seeing it produce information. So now there is an information component to it that needs to be secured. Can anybody tell me whose job it is to secure it? Just take a guess. Everybody's. Yeah, everybody's job. That's the key. So what we're going to talk about today is cybersecurity composition. So we're keeping on the theme of cyber harmony. So there's a lack of frameworks and things in the industry, but it all comes down to 3 simple pieces that you need to put together to have a composition: people, process, and technology. The first determines the roles and responsibilities. Who's who in the zoo, who's responsible for what. The process determines what, how, and when those people that are identified in the roles and responsibilities are supposed to do something. And the technology is the enabler of those capabilities. So if an owner comes in and sets a North Star of cybersecurity, then everything else that falls underneath it needs to accommodate and accomplish some cybersecurity in some fashion. So if we take a look at writing the score, we saw this on the initial video, but you've got owners, operations people, you've got property managers, then you've got all the people that actually put the stuff in and do the stuff. System integrators, architects, general contractors, product teams. When I say product teams, those are manufacturers and the people that support them, and then design teams. So there's a real relationship here. And if you can bring everybody together and have them sit in the same room. Now, I don't know how many of you attended this last one here with Bedrock, BAS to the cloud, but I don't even know why I'm here. Because if you attended that, then you could probably skip this, because that is the ideal state of operations. It's nothing but open communication between system integrators, platform providers, the owners themselves, stepping up and providing resources in terms of making sure their network is secure, making sure that what goes on it is tuned correctly, being able to provide platform space in a secure manner. And so the one thing that's always missing from these things is who's conducting, right? Who's actually supposed to be responsible for pulling all this stuff together? But if you have this cyber harmony framework, you know that everybody is going to play a role, and not necessarily one person is responsible for the whole thing. But if everybody comes together and talks about it, you can usually figure out who's who in the zoo and who's going to do what. I like to term it like family reunion, right? You get a bunch of people together, everybody's going to come in. All right, who's cooking on what day? All right, well, I'll take breakfast on this day and I'll take dinner on this day, right? We naturally organize things, so why can't we do that in this environment? So if we talk about orchestration and we apply that simple principle of people, process, and technology, you can see where those roles start to break into account. Owners set the North Star with their input from their operations and property managers. They determine and send that over to the architect and general contractor. Sometimes there's no architect, sometimes there's just a general contractor, design build. There's always going to be a design team. Design team has to pick a product. So if cybersecurity is your North Star, then I have to pick a product that is cyber securable, right? And use that in my specifications. System integrators have to actually do the securing of the product that was chosen, and they have to include it in their submittals. And then also work with the product teams. So one of the things that we want to talk about today are the key components of performing, right? So we've decided what type of music we're going to make, we've written the score, we've assembled the orchestra together. How do we bring it all together? Owners declare it, product teams make it. They have to make products that are secure by default. Little simple things. I call this minimum viable product for cybersecurity, basic cyber hygiene. Forced change of defaults, usernames, passwords, enabling assigning roles of a default privilege level. Don't give me admin on something that I don't know what I'm doing. That's a terrible idea, right? Disable unused interfaces. Can't tell you how many times I've walked into a place and I've got a HVAC controller that's broadcasting wireless to get connected because it's convenient, because it's tucked way high up in the ceiling, but it's also unsecured. Right? And I could walk all over a hospital and find these things all over the place. Design teams are responsible for understanding what that means. They have to be able to find those products that can be securable. And then they also have to specify the basic cyber hygiene and the execution side of the specs. Change the defaults, assign the roles, disable unused interfaces, right? Those are action terms. So I have to find the thing and then I have to provide an action to do it in a direction. System integrators perform. Right? So now I've got this spec, I have to provide a submittal based on this, I have to pick up the right product, I have to know that when I get the job and I go to put it in, that I'm going to be doing my part with that minimum viable product of cybersecurity hygiene that doesn't cost me anything, right? Because if the manufacturer makes a product that when you boot it up, it asks you to change the password upon boot up, how hard is that to change password? You kind of can't get in it. And then architects and GCs, because they're responsible for delivery of the project, they should be responsible and figure out a way to deliver a program, whether it's through cyber commissioning or some other process, to make sure that the cyber hygiene was delivered. And then property managers and operations folks need to maintain and evolve. That's what I loved about that last story with Bedrock, is they have grown. Their journey has started in 2013 with the first 6 buildings down here. They had some systems, they replaced some systems, but they've evolved. They've seen the value, and they've derived that everybody working together to make it secure makes that data valuable, and they've used that data operationally to expand and continue to grow. And so that's what we want to talk about today a little bit. And from our different perspectives, we have some questions.
Absolutely. So I'm going to ask, let's ask you first, because you worked on the OPR, the Owner's Project Requirements document, which has cyber language embedded in it. What role does the owner play in cyber harmony? You mentioned that North Star, right? And we all know that the owner is the major stakeholder. So what role does the owner play? How could they do a better job? They
own the initial liability and the initial risk. If I don't, as an owner, specify that I want a safe property or I want something that's securable or secured, then I'm assuming that risk. I'm assuming an operational risk, and I'm assuming the liability from a cyber risk. Because again, operational technology senses or manipulates the physical world. And so a lot of things can happen in that. I can shut down a building in 2 seconds. If I were to sit in a parking lot, I can watch who pulls up in their trucks, because everybody wears a uniform. And then I know, and I can go to the city county records, I can look up and see when the building was built. I know what types of controls you probably have based on that because of the time frame. Now all I gotta do is find a way in. It's not that hard. I already know that you've got JCI or Honeywell or some other truck pulling up to your company. I guess the equipment, I know when in. I take a walk in the building. Oh, by the way, here's a thumb drive with Bobby's first year birthday pics on it. Oh, I don't want them to lose their birthday pics. I'm going to plug it into my USB drive. Oh, sorry, I own you now. It's that simple, right? So it starts with owner's intent, because everybody else that follows, the owner has to be on board. When I specify things in our divisional specs as a consulting engineer, I put cyber stuff in there and I put owner's requirements in there. Well, I didn't know when I first started that I was so far down the totem pole from the owner. I was promising stuff for the owner to do that they were never going to see. So I said, okay, we got to change that paradigm.
Right.
Yeah, I would add to that I think a big responsibility of the owner is building out that appropriate team and understanding the need. And so, like Mike was talking about, when we're working on a project and we actually have questions and we're trying to flesh out what their strategy is, I can't tell you how many times that they get those questions and go, I don't have anybody that can answer these. And it's like, well, that's problem number one right there. Right. We've got to build an OT team here that's going to really think and go deep on those strategies to be able to set the North Star. Because too many of our large institutional clients just are kind of managing with both outdated equipment and outdated philosophy on how to manage it.
So when the owner doesn't have, let's just say, the knowledge to make sure that when they're putting projects out there for systems integrators to bid on, to make sure that they have cyber language embedded, most systems integrators, they will give you what you paid for, right? And what you pay for is what's in the contract documents.
That you knew to ask for.
Yeah, right. So as a systems integrator, what should I do as far as providing best in breed products to make sure that my owner's building is secure? We talked about things at AHR like zero trust and things like that. I want to pose this to you, Nitesh. What type of products are out there? What should those products look like when it comes to zero trust, remote access, if in fact that stuff isn't specified?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I represent the product team here on this panel, and I completely agree with Mike that you got to do secure by default, and it's literally, by design, not as an afterthought. I've seen, the evolution of cybersecurity generally as equivalent to an insurance. It's like, why do I need it? What's the need for it? It's just a burden. Suddenly I'll need to learn new things. I need to, go into areas that I don't know. It's uncomfortable for everyone to go. And that's where the job of the product teams here, like us, in the industry, is to provide that capability and deliver with simple enough understanding of benefits from get-go to make sure and give the comfort to the system integrators and then to the owners. What they are buying today is what is future looking. So if you look at the journey of the construction industry, and I'm still learning, come from the IT world, been in this for 7 years and still getting to understand that. Systems were designed for you buy the whole system, you configure it on a laptop, you install it in a building, then you get to that system to serve it and operationalize it and upgrade it. They were never designed to talk to each other. It was like, I'm here, this is my job, I got spec, this is what I do, I'm leaving. But then came the need for these systems to talk to each other because the world around us changed. The owners had to get to know what's happening there. The minute now you have connectivity happening, that's when things started to bubble up and go like, whoa, is it really secure? And to Mike's point, when I walked in 7 years back, I saw on these systems sitting there, admin, do not change password, or root admin, and things like that. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it's great. And to his point, I walked in, we just scanned the Wi-Fi networks. It says BMS network. I'm like, oh, let me connect there. I just did a device discovery. I could find the printers. I could find the other IT servers, and I'm like, oh, this is not good. Why? Because nobody thought about it. It was an afterthought as the need arose, and then you had to think it. But now coming in, you got to start with, by default, deny all, trust no one. And then to Mike's point and to your point, start with what does Nitesh need access to, when, and for how long? Just give me access to only that part for that duration. Why? Because there's a saying in legal, you don't want to know things that you don't know how to operate on because it'll get you in trouble. The more that you get access to, the more liability you're signing up for. So that's where it's the job of us as product teams to give the capabilities of cyber built by design, not as an afterthought, with flexibility, ease of use, and operations to allow for system integrators and owners to quickly get this out there without disrupting the existing systems. You got to build a moat around that cyber secures it. Build a layer that allows for access into these systems in a much more federated and an easy way, and then take them to the next set of upgrade for new projects where it then becomes a standard. Very similar to how construction standards are there. Greg, I know you're leading the industry to go there with REC. It will become a standard. It's a matter of time.
Yeah,
and
we're pushing hard.
Yeah, in the current world that we live in, the cyber attacks on physical infrastructures have skyrocketed. I see it on my product. That's what keeps me up at night. I have my customers that I'm serving, and I'm giving them a promise that I'll keep you secure. So I better stay ahead of this curve. That's what I take as a responsibility as a product team, so that this harmony can work, and we don't have to ever, worry about this going forward.
So what do you tell an integrator who says, because I had an integrator tell me this, well, we have insurance. If there's a cyber incident, our insurance will just handle it. Either one of you guys take that, or all three. Someone take that.
They don't.
Yeah.
Right.
Because there's different kinds of cyber insurance. The insurance they probably have is operational liability, which means as I operate my company, if I sign a contract and I have your data stored in my system and I get hacked, I'm covered. If I'm doing a job that involves some type of cybersecurity, because installing anything this day does, if it has a username and password associated with it, that is professional liability. That is not covered by general liability cybersecurity insurance. So that's actually not true. And if you take a look at, you hear the term zero trust, big phrase now, but really it's a concept that has been around for a long time. As a system integrator, to take advantage of this type of stuff, if I'm going to be supporting this, I don't want to roll a truck out there. I want a guy sitting in his truck at another job site, remoting in and figuring out what's going on with the hot cold call or whatever it is in the building, right? I want to lower my cost of operations, so I'm going to drop a cell modem in there. Well, if that system isn't secured and it gets attacked, which has happened, I've seen it, I've done it in pen tests, now I'm liable for that. And the owner says, well, I didn't know you did that. Why? Because it wasn't in the contract. So there's this whole ambiguity, but you will be all held culpable. So if you pursue zero trust, don't trust anybody, right? So you formulate a relationship based on trust by saying, I'm going to introduce minimum viable security, right? Which is what we have up on the screen. Those are the simple things that you can do to try to CYA and cover and bring those in. Products like Neeve fill a bigger niche because now I can actually leverage that as a service and provide secure remote access, not only just to myself, but I can manage it for anybody that needs secure remote access to your system.
That's a perfect segue to the question I had for Donnie. So what is the consulting engineer's responsibility, right? When designing a system, you're designing a system for an owner who really doesn't know how that language, that cyber language, should go into the specification. What should consulting engineers be thinking about as far as specifying secure deployments for OT?
That's one of the reasons that we were a strong advocate for the OPR, because if we're going to put something into a design, you end up with drawings and specifications. Things are kind of all over the place in the normal way that we assemble things. But until you put something succinctly in a way that the integrator can understand what the plan is, that the owner agrees that that's what the plan is, and the who does what and who's responsible, and what the outcome is that you're looking for, it's really hard for everyone to get on the same page with that. So we see integrators all the time that are working on a project, very well intended, think that what they're doing is the right thing,
Sure, right.
but then there's a disconnect with what the owner thinks their responsibility is and what they're doing and what their IT team thinks. And
So are you guys seeing the use of Division 25 as the North Star to point all the other divisions who are involved in the integration back to, or
on the
is it a
specification,
combination?
that's where we have our cyber requirements, along with
In Div
platform
25.
requirements, and all of that is in Div 25. But then that OPR is something that's more, kind of like a conceptual design, that it's not a part of the construction documents.
Right.
It's just that means of
language
facilitating
gets-
information from owner to design firm to integrator, and ultimately back to the commissioning agent to make sure that it all actually got done.
I think the biggest, most powerful tool that you can have, that anybody can have, is to ask a question,
Absolutely.
right? Like, when you sit down at your first meeting, is cybersecurity going to be a part of this, right? Do you have an IT team? Do you have standards that I need to design to, right? What am I putting in? What do I have to do? And that sometimes in and of itself can raise awareness. Oh, we don't have anything. All right, cool. Well, I'm just going to change the default passwords. I'll give you a list of passwords when I'm done. You know, you can start going down your path of that. The owner says, oh, you know what? I should probably have something. And so I need to develop a standard for that, which they probably already have. IT standards are a little strict when it comes to OT. Sometimes they can bottleneck the technology a little bit. And so there is a way to work through that. A lot of companies have already done it. Bedrock is one of the great examples. I just sat, like literally, I was sitting there going, this is the perfect example of how to make it work.
We've got another one coming.
Yeah, good.
So so we've talked about the owner, we've talked about the integrator a little bit, we've talked about the consulting engineer, the manufacturer, right? How important is it for manufacturers to have secure by design practices? But from a cyber standpoint, how important is it for you guys to manufacture not only products that are cyber secure when it comes to a remote access tool, but something that's the easy button? Because we know that contractors, right, systems integrators, they want the easy button,
100%.
right?
Yeah, and that is the toughest challenge that we have as a product team, Greg. I mean, I'll tell you the 3 core principles on which, I'm building this company, Neeve, which means foundation, is number 1, be human. You got to have empathy for, everyone, your colleagues, your partners, your customers, and the industry that you're going with. The second one is keep it simple. And the third one is always improve. Second one is the toughest. We engineers, we like, tough challenges. That's what gives us the adrenaline rush. And we want to make it very complicated. Because if it's simple, we're like, why are we doing it? We are the smartest here. But doing the toughest thing and then getting it to the simplest part is where the challenge lies. And that's the number 1 thing we all need to do. If we make it complicated, nobody's going to touch it. I think we just discussed in the last discussion, don't touch the black box. You need an expert who is certified, who's trained, who can only touch it. But our job here is to get that complexity and then make it, with the easy button. And that comes in by taking all these information and requirements, distilling it down to implementation core principle by understanding what is it that's required to deploy it and operationalize it. Distill it down to, as they say in the e-commerce world, less than 3 clicks. That's it. If you make it less than 3 clicks, people will buy.
Right.
If it takes a click fest with things that you're typing that only an engineer can understand, 90% of the guys are gone. They're like, I need to hire experts. That's cost. I need to then keep them motivated to be in my, in my organization, and more importantly, have them engaged enough to, be here. And that's going to be difficult. That's what we do, and all of us as product teams are now challenging ourselves to see how we can simplify this complexity and make it simple while keeping the world around us. Security is the job that starts the day you get deployed. It doesn't end.
Right.
Why? Because the world moves at a very quick pace, and you need to stay at least at par with what's changing around. Every day, the number of vulnerability exposures, Mike alluded to, is growing. Why? Because the software stack we use, the hardware components we use to design the products are now getting exploited. You need to then put those hooks quickly to make sure that our customers and everyone that we serve are staying ahead of the curve. And that's what we mean by secure by design. That's what we do, and that's what we provide. If we don't do it, Mike had a picture in the last one, it's those instruments. If they don't perform, orchestra is not going to sound good. And you don't want that. It really starts with that, and that's our responsibility, and that's what we do. And built in by going into denial, allow only who needs access, only when they need it, always be awake, look at what's happening around, bring that in, and deliver as a service.
And that's what we're talking about from a solution standpoint.
That's correct.
Right? Hardware and software solution
That's
standpoint for cyber.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
And I want to, you touched on something there, and you said it too. It's securable products, right? Just because it's cyber secure by design, there's usually an element that a human has to interact with it to actually secure it.
Yeah.
I've sat with huge manufacturers, and they dog and ponied their cloud-based solution and their product line and what they're doing to secure everything. And I asked them one simple question. Do you have a training program for your system integrators and your partners?
You need a rocket scientist.
Dead science across it. It was crazy. I was just like, yeah, you guys kind of forgot to close that gap. Because if you're not telling people they need to turn it on or training them on how to turn it on, because it's very simple, right?
Yep.
You just keep the interface simple, 1 or 2 clicks, that's all you need to do, and you've started your client's cyber journey.
Yep.
And it's up to them to evolve it, right? Because as long as you're doing a minimum viable product with basic cyber hygiene, this will take 60% of the problem away just by changing the defaults and turn off unused interfaces. Literally. That's huge, because how many thousands of pieces of equipment? How many data points did they say they had in the tower? 77,000 data points, right? So think of all the different pieces of equipment, IP-enabled controllers that are controlling all the stuff that's out there. Do you want to go and touch every single one of those? Or do you want it installed correctly when it goes in the first time? Right, and make it secure.
One word of caution on that, we had a project where the system was hacked during construction.
Yep.
And so, the integrator system was hacked the way that they had set it up. We said, well, what about all the security measures that we had? Well, I haven't enabled those yet. We were going to do that at turnover. Like,
Right, during commissioning and turnover, right.
Like, you gotta rethink that one.
That's a lesson learned, right?
I think to Mike's point about the training, candidly, we as engineers, or especially the technology engineers, we just take things for granted. Because we're like, yeah, we're building it, everybody will get it. One of the key learnings we had is what Mike said. I was asked about 18 months back, okay, so how do we get trained on this? I'm like, oh. Good question. Well, maybe, I'll get one of my systems engineers out there. He'll sit with you in your lab and he'll just, work with your engineers and go and get that done. They're like, you don't have a training program? And I'm like, duh, what was I thinking? Of course
I know this stuff.
Yeah, I know this stuff. So, I need a training program. And then we established a training academy. And then by feedback coming in, we have now seen a huge, improvement in the product, Greg.
But that's how the OT world works.
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
The BAS world works,
Yes.
right? There's training programs for pretty much everything, right? And cybersecurity has to catch up.
Yep.
Right.
There's training on the function of the devices and the systems, but not the how.
Not the how to.
How it does all stuff.
Yeah. And then more importantly, what it did, selfishly for us, we got the feedback from all of you in saying, hey, can you do it this way? And we immediately implemented. Because now we were working with our end users, empathizing with them, making it simpler for them. That's the way the technology gets adopted. I mean, the reason iPhone got in, I'll tell you an analogy. My dad hated it. He was like, man, I just need to make a call. The buttons were super simple. I can dial and make a call. Why do I have to slide, put a password, then click on this icon and then dial? From there to now, he's a big fan, but that's the same thing here. We got to make it simple and give them the confidence that they're not going to mess it up. Right. That's the key here to
started
get that
doing
done.
that with some of our drawings in lieu of our spec language. Because if you read some construction specs, they put me to sleep and I write them. So I'm never going to read through that to get to the bottom to find the 5 or 6 little lines that are going to tell me what to do. So we came up with a way to we have some, like information graphics, right? Infographics that we put on there, and it's iconic. They're little icons that we put on our drawings. And so it has like an admin human, and it has a line and a zero, like a zero with a line through it. Like, don't use admin as the username. And we put those in the notes on our drawings for controls and things like that. That started to get a lot of good feedback and reach out. And that's something that doesn't cost anything, right? It takes 2 seconds of time to create a new username and password, to sign in the privilege level, and to disable the admin, or at least change the password from the default.
Yeah,
so,
I think the construction documents have been evolving over the years. One of the things that I was pushing out was called a systems integration drawing, right? The old systems architecture drawing would just show a riser diagram of just the controllers, but now we go all the way from how is Niagara being deployed, where's the routers, where's the network management switch, right? Are we deploying to the cloud? Is there I'm sorry, are there 2 servers with an instance in the cloud? Like, you have to put the entire architecture on a set of drawings. You have to put down the roles and responsibilities, right, in a matrix to let everyone from Division 26, 27, 23, 25 know that the North Star is this drawing, right? And this is where your roles and responsibilities are. So let me ask this. Is there enough incentive, financial or otherwise, for all of these stakeholders that we're looking at that are involved in this whole cyber harmony model? Is there enough incentive for them to start taking cybersecurity more serious and start to look at best practices outside of just construction documents?
Yeah,
Who wants to take that one?
Sure. The short answer is absolutely, Greg. Why? Because the world that we live in and the way the buildings operate have changed. They need to serve the expectation of all of us as occupants within the buildings, and that requires systems that have to work together with each other. Every system that goes in a building has to work in a harmony, and the minute that happens, each interaction is an opportunity for a leak, and each leak is an opportunity for the entire building to come down. So you have to design by security first, or secure by design. I mean, that's what the buildings are supposed to do. The buildings are there to protect us as occupants from the external environments. That's what the building does. And then the systems that operate this infrastructure has to be that equal secure. Now, coming to the financial, currently just the cost of A, procuring, B, configuring, and C, operating this infrastructure, if you just did the way that you were doing 10 years back, with the overall cost of human capital and also the cost of just the pure components which are making this infrastructure, it's just unattainable. You will never get a return on an operations basis if you just stuck with the previous stack. So you've got to be cyber secure because engagement is key. Accessibility anywhere, anytime is key. That brings in visibility, agility, and future proofs it, and that's the only way forward. And without cybersecurity, you can't do it. I mean, it's a thing about I'll say about the Tesla cars. If the batteries were still blowing up and catching fire, they will not be on the road.
Right.
Very simple. So you got to get this to a level. And if the cloud had issues where our personal information was getting leaked everywhere, nobody's going to use the cloud. We'll go back to the old USB keys and those backup hard drives that we had at home. But now we have forgotten about it because cloud is by default secure. And that's the same thing with operations technologies. It's no longer an option. It is a requirement.
Yeah. Any real world examples of where the whole cyber harmony model wasn't in place, similar to what you just saw with Bedrock?
Yeah.
And you had something that was less than favorable or desirable outcome?
Yeah,
You guys have a real world example?
Yeah, I have.
I did a good chunk of my business doing pen testing and taking a look at posture and all that. And there's a ton of people out there that just have no idea how vulnerable they are to certain things. Like I gave that example, sitting outside a building, watching the trucks come and go, and then going to look up in the county when the building was built, and following the rabbit trail back with a thumb drive that now I own your older building. And it's not just that, it's affecting tenants, right? So you could be a gateway, right, as a building. You could be, as a system integrator, we design things. We design banks and vaults and security systems for all kinds of institutions. We could be a target, right? Our information security has to be so tight because we're protecting our clients' designs and assets. So when I talk about going back, everybody watches that movie in Ocean's 11 where they're like, pull out the plans, and how'd you get the plans? Well, I just, I know a guy, right? So, but that's one of the steps. Intelligence, forensics, those are the two key components to any successful attack, right? And it's not an attack. I'm not gonna get in your building today and turn off the power, right? I'm gonna get in your building, and I'm gonna watch. I'm gonna see what else is connected. And then I'm going to do another thing. And I'm going to sit there for 2 years. I'm going to learn all the data. Because why? That's what our red teams do for our government. They go after our targets, if you will, and they penetrate, and they figure out a way in, and then they just sit there, and they don't do anything, and they wait for the call to flip the button, right? That's what ends up happening. That's what happened with all of the recent hacks. People end up tending to do that. Now, if you have a tenancy, let's say you're an owner, and you've got government that occupies your building space, and you have an assessment done, but you decided to exclude certain areas, and those areas are vulnerable because there is no cyber harmony. It's all siloed, but somebody decided to connect it. One of my favorite examples is when you have a BAS system that's on a closed network, right? Manageable, unmanaged switches, connecting all the stuff together, everybody's talking, everybody's happy, and then somebody decides, I need weather data. I need outside weather data, and I can't get a sensor outside the building, so I'm gonna plug in and get it from the internet, right? So I'm gonna buy a cable modem, I'm gonna hook up a cell modem, I'm gonna plug that in, and now I go to shodan.io, which is a really cool website, and I type in BACnet, and all of a sudden, millions of sites come up that are exposed because their supervisor is exposed wide open to the internet. And I've seen it, and I've done it, because I go and I research what the default username and passwords are for these things, and I wrote a script that would actually download all this stuff and then apply those different usernames and passwords. and I was really successful at getting into them. I'm talking schools, government infrastructures, Class A office space, hospitals, all kinds of places are totally vulnerable to this type of stuff. And I do it because it was fun, right? But if I was actually malicious, we have an entire world filled of people that are basically the old school pirates come back, right? I'm making a tool to sell to this guy so that he can use it on you, right? And that's gonna be ransomware, right? I'm gonna sell a penetration tool to this guy so that you can get access to somebody else's stuff. And so that's why this whole thing, it seems innocuous, it seems not as important as making the buildings functional and running, but I'm telling you, it's just as necessary to protect that data that these systems are being produced. Because remember in the beginning, I said it impacts the physical world and senses the physical world, but it's now starting to produce data. And that data is now being used in different ways. And if you can't trust that data, because it's a whole chain, then the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah. So it takes me to my next point. We've talked about the owner's roles and responsibilities as far as creating an OPR, owner's project requirements. That language gets deployed or gets embedded into the construction documents. Let's go to, after that technology is deployed, cyber commissioning. That's a word that's starting to pick up a lot of traction. I know we're doing a podcast with Cecilia in a couple weeks about cyber commissioning, and none of the commissioning organizations have adopted a formal cyber commissioning process, right? We all know what commissioning is, right? In the building world, right? So there's a thing called cyber commissioning. Talk to me, and I know you guys do it, so talk to me a little bit about your process, and just from 30,000 foot level, right? You don't have to give away all your trade secrets, but let's talk about what cyber commissioning looks like to you and why it's so necessary in today's world.
So, I mean, commissioning itself is validating that you are getting what you paid for.
By a third party.
Right, by a third party. And so, you know, just like you said, we see the commissioning world being very set in what they do, which is functional testing of mechanical equipment, some, you know, visual inspection of electrical equipment, but, you know, it doesn't get into that data
You
later.
don't touch the electrical?
And but without it getting to that data layer, then a lot of the things that we're talking about on, you know, have I secured it in the way that was all agreed upon, and you know, is the data mapping correctly, you know, or my analytics, if you have that on your project, is that actually performing the right function? And so that data side has to be commissioned. So yeah, we started up a team to do that work because we were working with owners that had gone on the journey, had gotten to the point where they see the value and importance and all these things, and then I don't have anybody on the team making sure that I'm getting all of this properly. So it's
Was it a tough sell to your customers to do cyber commissioning? Because I imagine it was this something that was sold at the front end or the back end?
It was something that was along the journey of we're gonna need to look at this and make sure that this actually gets done. And because they had spent the investment in doing this, they wanted that validation that everything was correct. But it is a tough sell to someone that's already on the fence on commissioning at all. You know, like, oh, I'm just going to trust that my general contractor and all of their subs are going to get my building turned over properly.
There's too much trust.
Right. And you know, people start to find out, owners that don't have a strong commissioning plan, and they just don't necessarily finish the job all the way.
And you guys implement it into your typical traditional commissioning process?
It can be separate or integrated. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, depending on the OT systems that are included in it. Because one of the things too that I just want to point out as a differentiator, if you're doing it as part of a cyber program, in other words, the owner specifies it, they want it, it's in the contract, it's going to happen, then the cyber language makes it in the spec. The spec is the contract.
Right.
So therefore, everybody that has a spec and responds with a submittal is in charge of that, contractually, delivering that.
Right.
If you don't have that in the beginning, then you didn't tell me I had to do it.
Yeah.
Right? So you take it from a contractual obligation to something that is, you know, it's just be a good person, button it up, you know, that kind of thing, but you can't hold them liable for that. So instead of the commissioning at the back end becoming a full commissioning thing during the warranty period where people are responsible for fixing those things that you point out, now it becomes a posture assessment.
There you go.
And now the onus and the shift of the responsibility and liability falls to the owner and their operations team. Because what you're doing is you're telling them this is how it went in, and this is a roadmap of things you need to fix in order to make it secure. So there is a bit of a differentiator there on where it falls within the project scope.
Does pen testing end up being a part of that?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that's where disable unused interfaces come from, right? So I can have, that's why I always said that there's nothing more vulnerable than throwing a manageable, unmanaged switch. Because what that means, it's set up by defaults. There's certain communication protocols that allow it to be written to and communicated with by default.
Yep.
And so if a human doesn't go in and turn those off, or if a manufacturer makes it disabled by default, which is awesome, because now as a human, I have to go in and enable it if I wanted it. So that removes a huge piece of it. Then that becomes part of our scan, right? So I have to make sure that, SNMP is turned off. I don't have the ability to write to things. Wi-Fi, unsecured Wi-Fi, while it's convenient because the thing's 30 feet in the ceiling, you should probably turn that off at some point, or at least put a password on it to make it a little bit more difficult. Don't use the default, right?
So before we wrap up and start filling a couple questions, for all three of you, and I'll start down here with Donnie, what do you think would help the communication and collaboration between IT, OT, the manufacturers, and the construction industry in general? How do we get cyber to move forward a little quicker than what we're seeing?
What I continue to advocate for is OT as a discipline, because that to me is it's that gray area between all of these different divisions.
Yeah.
And then there's the owner responsibility, and so it's not repeatable on every project because different owners have different, maybe I have an outsourced network provider, or maybe I have an IT group that only facilitates this and I need to turn this over to facilities. And so until you have someone on the team, which is something that we do and advocate for, that puts all that together and makes sure that everybody understands their part and how they fit into it, then you're going to continue to end up with an industry that's fragmented and not providing a secure final product, but not because of ill intent or even just shucking responsibility, but just not knowing that they needed to do that because the process wasn't defined for them.
Yeah. How about you, Nitesh?
I would say, having a principle, which is, I would say a must-have, is secure by design. Has to be, people, process, and technology, all three. It has to come with that as a mindset shift that needs to happen. That's the only way the industry and the entire ecosystem is going to have the same language. Otherwise, there will be gaps in communication and hence the understanding and priority, and you will always have this as an afterthought. The only way we can get there is by taking security by design as a core principle for every building or for built world.
Okay. How about you, Mike?
I would say drop your britches and talk about your breaches. A lot of places have had a lot of things happen and nobody talks about it for many different reasons, right? It's reputation risk, it's operational risk. Nobody wants to be in my building if I've had something happen. But if everybody keeps going thinking that nothing ever happened to my neighbor and I have no idea what's going on, but something did happen and I don't know about it, then I'm not going to take it necessarily seriously. But we are starting to see some of that change. I was just reading a spec submittal the other day on a lighting control system, and right at the very bottom, it said cybersecure ISA 62443-1 certified by DECA. And so they are kind of like a UL listing company. They have a cybersecurity program for vendors where vendor can go and get paid, and they will do certification for a very stringent cybersecurity framework that's out there. And I thought that was great, right? And I'm like, okay, this is perfect. Now, vendors are starting to pay, so now it's an easy button. When I talked to the CISO of JP Morgan Chase, he's like, man, I would just love it if products came with a badge. If they came with a badge and they qualified for all this stuff, I would tell my people to pick this product every time and put it in my building. And if it didn't have it, then I don't want it. Right, so we're starting to see some of that shift in the industry. Yeah, more product certification, right? It comes like, here's a product that's secured. Now, me as a consulting engineer can just go to that list and say, okay, I've got 3 different controls things. I can do this, I can do that. I'm going to put these together and put that in my spec. The system integrator is a partner of them. They go out and respond with a submittal. In the execution section, they're told, right? You have to include this and activate these certain features and functions while you're installing the equipment. And then you turn over at the end of the day, ideally, you turn it over to the property managers and operations folks to operate and maintain and evolve that. So now I've introduced it, I've started them on their cyber journey, but it's still up to the owners and the owners' teams to continue that journey.
So with that, we're gonna ask if anyone has any questions. Hold on, he has a mic for you.
Can you hear me? Cool. Okay, so you're talking about cybersecure specifications, providing products that are cybersecure. So in the software world that we live in, right, we are also living in a world that is looking at recurring revenue and subscription services for software. So how are you creating your specifications to be future-proofed for companies that are making software that are subscription-based? How does that equate into these specifications for building owners, especially with like turnaround in operations and owners and management companies and things like that? Or is that a factor at all?
Oh, it's a huge factor. Absolutely. It's a paradigm shift for the industry overall because, when you're in IT, you're used to SaaS, right? That just comes, I pay a monthly or a yearly fee to Microsoft so I can write emails, right? And work on spreadsheets. That is changing now. But you hear that you already have to pay to maintain that equipment, right? So Tritium Niagara has an entire structure that's set up where you pay monthly or pay yearly and you pay per point. So there already is this operational mindset that's starting to transform. And cybersecurity is just one more piece of that. So if I'm already buying a product and I have to pay to maintain it, the only difference is now it's not just an update on how the widget performs its main function, but how it performs. So there's two separate sections when you look at an update. One is firmware for the device that actually changes the way it functions its thing. But then there's risks and liability, or risks and mitigating updates for or vulnerabilities that come into play, right? So I'm only going to update when I have to deal with this. Well, having a cybersecurity program means you should update because of this too. Even if there's no feature set updates, you should still update for that. And you're already paying for that anyway, right? And everybody, in theory, should be keeping their stuff up to date. So there's really not a whole lot of a heavy lift coming down the pipe.
Right, and that's why it's so important to start this stuff during the design phase and have these conversations with facilities and IT.
Are you
let them know
equipped?
exactly for it to hit their operations budget.
Yeah, I was
Go
going
ahead, Donnie.
to say, we design every project with the assumption that they are going to have data coming from their systems to the cloud. And they may not be doing that on day one. We'll have a conversation about it. And if they say, oh yeah, not doing that, have no intent to, like, okay, we're still going to design that capability in because you probably will. Just the conversation from earlier today that the applications are too good to not allow your organization to get there, and so they may not have that strategy today, but we're going to design it as if there is, because otherwise you get the insecure designs or you get the kind of products that are not the latest and greatest, and so we're providing that level of guidance because it is inevitable.
Yeah, great question.
I'm actually glad you asked it because all our products are subscription based, and that is the number one pushback that I get. Wait, why do I have to pay every year? I'm like, because I'm protecting you 24/7 and I'm going to continue to protect you all the time. It's not like you just buy and then, you're done. So, that is the one thing I think industry is now finally getting their head around that. As I said, cybersecurity starts the day you turn the lights on. And it needs to be invested. I need to continue to innovate because that's the only way I can, protect everything that's happening out there. And that will not come if it is just one-time transaction, then you're done.
Yeah.
We have time for one more question. Paul, you said you had a question?
We don't need that. They can all hear me. I have a question going back to what Mike was talking about, the certification of the devices and the software platforms. I'm going to redirect it back to you. When is Tritium and all the other vendors that produce hardware and software in this room, when are they going to get on board with a program like that? Because we already have cybersecurity certifications. That's why everyone's relaxed so much. And you'll be hearing more from me this afternoon. Because I want to know the answer. Because I've been in this industry longer than anybody, maybe except for a couple of us. And nothing has changed. All we hear about is, we can do all these things, but it's cybersecure, but it's a headache as an engineering consulting firm to get with the IT teams and get approval because there's nothing to measure against standards.
We got some answers back here.
Hey,
Is this a preview for 2 o'clock today?
Hold on, time out. We're going to send that conversation outdoors because we're going to start eating into lunchtime.
Yep.
I like for Roxanne, Ed.
Donnie and Mike, a client comes to you.
Yeah.
I want you guys to do this, design, whatever. And they say, and I want no cybersecurity. I don't care.
Oh.
Would you take that client on? Yes or no?
No.
Not a thing.
Okay, we need more of that.
Yeah.
And with that, let's give our panelists a round of applause. I really appreciate you guys sitting in on our session. I hope you have some great takeaways.